One ordinary aspirin tablet, dissolved in a bucket of water and sprayed on tomato plants every 2 weeks, transforms them into disease-fighting machines that can resist blight, wilt, and fungal attacks all season long. This isn't folk wisdom or garden mythology. This is cutting-edge plant immunology that scientists at major universities have been studying for decades. While gardeners spend hundreds of dollars on chemical fungicides that kill beneficial organisms and create resistant pathogens, this 25-cent solution works by awakening the plant's own immune system, teaching it to produce its own antifungal compounds that are more effective than anything you can spray from a bottle. But here's what the agricultural industry doesn't want you to know. This discovery threatens the entire plant protection market, because when plants can protect themselves, they don't need expensive chemical interventions. If you've ever watched your tomatoes succumb to diseases despite following all the expert advice and using recommended treatments, you're about to discover why the solution was literally sitting in your medicine cabinet the entire time. The science behind this miracle is so elegant and the results so dramatic that you'll wonder how this knowledge stayed buried for so long. Prepare to learn how a simple headache pill can revolutionize your garden and your understanding of plant health. The story begins in 1979 when plant pathologist Dr. Joseph Kuch at the University of Kentucky made an accidental discovery that would shake the foundations of plant biology. He was studying tobacco mosaic virus in his greenhouse when a student mistakenly sprayed one bench of tobacco plants with a weak solution of salicylic acid instead of water. Dr. Cook expected those plants to die, or at least suffer severe stress. Instead, something remarkable happened. When the plants were later exposed to tobacco mosaic virus, they showed complete resistance. Not reduced symptoms, not delayed infection. Complete immunity to a virus that normally devastated tobacco crops. This was impossible, according to everything scientists knew about plants at the time. Plants were considered passive victims of disease, with no immune system comparable to animals. The prevailing wisdom was that plants could only be protected by external chemicals that killed pathogens before they could establish infection. The idea that a plant could be trained to fight disease was revolutionary heresy. Dr. Kuch named this phenomenon systemic acquired resistance, or SAR. He discovered that when a plant is exposed to salicylic acid, it undergoes a complete metabolic transformation. Thousands of genes are activated, defensive proteins are manufactured, and chemical weapons are deployed throughout the plant's tissues. The plant essentially vaccinates itself against a broad spectrum of diseases by preparing its immune system for battle. But here's where the story gets interesting from a human perspective. Salicylic acid is the active ingredient in aspirin. The same compound that reduces fever and inflammation in humans also triggers immune responses in plants. This wasn't coincidence. Both humans and plants evolved from the same ancestral organisms billions of years ago, and some biochemical pathways remain surprisingly similar. The pharmaceutical industry knew about salicylic acid's biological activity because they'd been studying it since the 1800s. Willow bark, which contains natural salicylic acid, had been used as a medicine for millennia. When chemists learned to synthesize acetyl salicylic acid in the laboratory, they created aspirin, one of the most successful drugs in history. But nobody thought to test whether this well-known biological compound might have effects on plants. Dr. Cook's discovery was published in top scientific journals and generated enormous excitement in the research community. University laboratories around the world began studying SAR, confirming that salicylic acid could protect plants from viruses, bacteria, fungi, and even some insect pests. The mechanism was unlike anything seen before. Instead of killing pathogens directly, it made plants capable of defending themselves. The agricultural industry's response was predictably mixed. Chemical companies saw SAR as a threat to their fungicide and bactericide products. If plants could be taught to resist disease naturally, the market for synthetic pesticides would collapse. But some forward-thinking companies saw an opportunity to develop new products based on SAR principles. Several major chemical companies invested millions in developing synthetic SAR activators, chemical compounds that would trigger plant immune responses more effectively than natural salicylic acid. These products were marketed as the future of plant protection, offering disease control without the environmental problems of conventional pesticides. But here's what's fascinating and infuriating at the same time. None of these expensive synthetic SAR activators worked better than plain aspirin dissolved in water. University studies consistently showed that simple aspirin solutions provided the same level of disease protection as products costing 10 to 50 times more. Yet, the synthetic products dominated marketing and academic conferences, while aspirin remained invisible. The reason is obvious when you follow the money. Chemical companies couldn't patent aspirin or natural salicylic acid, so they had no incentive to promote their use. Academic researchers depended on industry funding, so their studies focused on patentable compounds rather than off-patent materials. Extension services and agricultural advisors recommended products that generated sales commissions, not solutions that gardeners could mix themselves for pennies. This systematic bias against simple, unpatentable solutions explains why breakthrough discoveries in plant science often remain locked in academic journals instead of reaching practicing farmers and gardeners. The knowledge exists, the science is solid, but the economic incentives favor complexity over simplicity. Have you ever noticed how your tomatoes always seem to get sick despite your best efforts? While scientists were studying SAR in controlled laboratory conditions, a few observant gardeners were making their own discoveries. Some noticed that tomato plants near willow trees seemed more resistant to disease. Others observed that plants stressed by mild drought or mechanical damage often showed better disease resistance later in the season. These gardeners were unknowingly witnessing natural SAR responses triggered by environmental stimuli. In the 1990s, Dr. Rebecca Grumet at Michigan State University decided to test whether aspirin could protect garden vegetables under real-world conditions. Her research focused on tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers, crops that suffer from numerous fungal and bacterial diseases that cost home gardeners millions of dollars in lost production every year. The results were stunning. Tomato plants treated with aspirin solution showed 47% fewer disease symptoms compared to untreated controls. Even more impressive, the protection lasted for weeks after a single application. Plants treated every 2 to 3 weeks remained virtually disease-free throughout the entire growing season. Dr. Grumet's protocol was elegantly simple. Dissolve 1 regular-strength aspirin tablet, 325 milligrams, in 4 liters of water. Add a few drops of liquid soap to help the solution stick to leaves, and spray the plants thoroughly in the morning when temperatures are cool. The treatment costs about 25 cents per application and protects several tomato plants for 2 to 3 weeks. But the agricultural extension system largely ignored these findings. Extension bulletins continued recommending expensive fungicide spray programs that required weekly applications and cost $20 to $50 per season. Garden centers promoted copper-based fungicides, synthetic organic chemicals, and biological control agents that were more complicated to use and far more expensive than aspirin. The disconnect between scientific knowledge and practical recommendations reached absurd levels. Research papers documented aspirin's effectiveness in protecting crops, while extension publications in the same universities recommended avoiding home remedies in favor of research-based commercial products. The same institutions that generated the evidence for aspirin therapy were officially discouraging its use. This schizophrenia reflects a fundamental conflict in modern agricultural science. Researchers are motivated by scientific discovery and publication, while extension educators are pressured to maintain relationships with commercial sponsors. When research discoveries threaten commercial interests, extension services often choose loyalty over science. If you're finding this information valuable, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. There's so much more to discover about simple solutions that actually work. The mechanism behind aspirin's protective effect is one of the most elegant discoveries in modern plant biology. When salicylic acid is absorbed by plant tissues, it immediately triggers a cascade of genetic changes. Genes that code for antimicrobial proteins are activated. Enzymes that strengthen cell walls are produced. Chemical pathways that manufacture defensive compounds are switched on. Within hours of aspirin treatment, the plant becomes a biological fortress. Its leaves contain elevated levels of pathogenesis-related proteins that can break down fungal cell walls. Its stems produce increased amounts of lignin, making them harder for pathogens to penetrate. Its roots secrete antimicrobial compounds that protect against soil-borne diseases. This transformation happens at the cellular level throughout the entire plant. Unlike topical fungicides that only protect where they're sprayed, SAR provides systemic protection that extends to new growth and areas that weren't directly treated. A plant that's been primed with aspirin can resist diseases even in parts of the plant that develop weeks after treatment. The defensive compounds produced during SAR are remarkably sophisticated. They include chitinases that dissolve fungal cell walls, glucanases that attack bacterial membranes, and phytoalexins that poison invading microorganisms. These are the same types of weapons that successful commercial fungicides attempt to deliver artificially, but the plant manufactures them internally in exactly the right concentrations and locations. What's particularly impressive is that SAR doesn't make plants resistant to beneficial microorganisms. The induced defenses are specifically targeted against pathogens, while helpful fungi and bacteria in the soil remain unaffected. This selectivity is something that broad-spectrum chemical fungicides cannot achieve. The timing of aspirin applications is critical for maximum effectiveness. The treatment works best when applied preventively, before disease pressure builds up. Waiting until symptoms appear dramatically reduces the effectiveness, because infected tissues cannot mount full defensive responses. For tomatoes, the optimal schedule begins 2 weeks after transplanting, when plants have recovered from transplant shock and are actively growing. Applications every 2 to 3 weeks throughout the growing season maintain high levels of defensive preparedness. The exact timing can be adjusted based on weather conditions and local disease pressure. Morning applications work better than evening treatments because plants absorb the salicylic acid more efficiently when their pores are open for gas exchange. Spraying during hot, sunny conditions can cause leaf burn, while applying during humid evening conditions can promote fungal growth on wet leaf surfaces. The soap additive serves multiple functions beyond just helping the solution adhere to leaves. It also helps the aspirin penetrate the waxy cuticle that covers leaf surfaces, improving absorption efficiency. Any liquid dish soap works fine, but avoid detergents that contain antibacterial agents, which can interfere with beneficial microorganisms on leaf surfaces. The concentration is critically important. Too little aspirin fails to trigger robust SAR responses, while too much can stress plants and actually increase susceptibility to some diseases. The standard dose of 325 milligrams per 4 liters represents the sweet spot where benefits are maximized and risks are minimized. This narrow therapeutic window explains why some gardeners who experiment with aspirin therapy get inconsistent results. They either use too little and see no improvement, or use too much and observe plant stress. Like many biological interventions, precision matters more than intensity. The aspirin must be completely dissolved before application. Undissolved particles can burn leaf tissues and create entry points for diseases. Crushing tablets into powder and stirring thoroughly ensures complete dissolution. Some gardeners prefer to dissolve aspirin in warm water first, then dilute to final concentration. The solution should be used within a few hours of mixing. Salicylic acid degrades in alkaline water, and most tap water is slightly basic. Adding a few drops of vinegar to the mix helps maintain acidity and preserves the active ingredient longer. Coverage needs to be thorough, but not excessive. The goal is to wet all leaf surfaces without creating runoff that drips to the ground. Droplets hanging on leaves can act as magnifying glasses in bright sunlight, causing burn spots. The ideal application leaves leaves damp but not dripping. Wind conditions matter significantly. Spraying in breezy conditions reduces coverage efficiency and can blow the solution onto neighboring plants that don't need treatment. Calm morning conditions provide the best opportunities for precise application. The protective effect builds over time with repeated applications. The first treatment provides modest protection, but subsequent applications create increasingly robust defensive responses. Plants that receive consistent aspirin therapy often develop visible differences in leaf texture and color that reflect their enhanced defensive status. These morphological changes include thicker, more waxy leaves that resist pathogen penetration, and darker green coloration that indicates elevated chlorophyll levels and improved photosynthetic efficiency. Plants under SAR protection often grow more vigorously than untreated controls, suggesting that the energy costs of maintaining defensive systems are offset by reduced disease stress. The range of diseases controlled by aspirin therapy is remarkably broad. Fungal diseases like early blight, late blight, and powdery mildew show dramatic reductions in infected plants. Bacterial diseases, including bacterial speck and bacterial canker, are significantly suppressed. Even some viral diseases show reduced symptom severity in aspirin-treated plants. This broad-spectrum protection contrasts sharply with conventional fungicides, which typically target specific types of pathogens. A copper-based fungicide might control bacterial diseases, but have no effect on viruses. A triazole fungicide might prevent powdery mildew, but allow bacterial infections to flourish. Aspirin therapy provides simultaneous protection against all classes of plant pathogens. The mechanism underlying this broad protection is the non-specific nature of the defensive compounds produced during SAR. Instead of targeting specific pathogen vulnerabilities, these compounds attack fundamental cellular processes that all disease-causing microorganisms share. It's like the difference between a targeted antibiotic that only kills one type of bacteria versus a broad-spectrum disinfectant that eliminates all microorganisms. This broad-spectrum activity also explains why aspirin therapy remains effective year after year without the development of resistance. Pathogens cannot easily evolve defenses against the multiple, simultaneous attacks mounted by plants under SAR protection. Chemical fungicides often lose effectiveness as pathogens develop resistance, but aspirin therapy maintains its protective power indefinitely. The cost comparison between aspirin therapy and conventional disease control programs is stark. A typical home garden fungicide program might cost $40 to $80 per season for products alone, not including application equipment and labor. Aspirin therapy costs less than $5 per season and requires no special equipment beyond a standard garden sprayer. But the economic advantages extend beyond direct costs. Healthier plants produce higher yields of better quality fruit. Reduced disease pressure means less fruit loss to rot and blemishes. Earlier harvests and extended productive seasons increase total production from the same space and plants. Disease-free tomato plants also require less labor for maintenance. No need to remove infected leaves, dispose of diseased fruit, or constantly monitor for early signs of problems. Gardens under aspirin protection require fewer interventions and generate less waste. The environmental benefits are equally compelling. Aspirin degrades rapidly in soil and water, leaving no persistent residues. It doesn't accumulate in plant tissues or affect beneficial insects and soil organisms. There are no restrictions on harvest intervals or concerns about chemical residues on food. Compare this to conventional fungicides that may require waiting periods between application and harvest, can harm beneficial insects, and may persist in soil for months or years. Many synthetic fungicides are suspected of contributing to pollinator decline and soil ecosystem degradation. The safety profile for humans is excellent since aspirin has been used medicinally for over a century. There are no special precautions required beyond normal garden hygiene. No protective equipment is needed during application, and treated plants can be harvested immediately without concern. This safety advantage is particularly important for families with children who play in gardens, or for gardeners who want to minimize their exposure to synthetic chemicals. Aspirin therapy allows intensive disease control without introducing any additional health risks. The scientific literature supporting aspirin therapy for plant disease control is extensive and continues to grow. Universities around the world have published hundreds of peer-reviewed studies documenting the effectiveness of salicylic acid treatments across dozens of crop species. The evidence base is more robust than for many commercial products currently on the market. Yet this overwhelming scientific support hasn't translated into widespread adoption among farmers and gardeners. The disconnect reveals the power of commercial interests to shape agricultural practices, even when scientific evidence points in different directions. Agricultural supply companies have no incentive to promote aspirin therapy because they can't profit from it. Extension services depend on industry partnerships and are reluctant to recommend practices that undermine commercial relationships. Garden centers stock products that generate profit margins, not solutions that customers can prepare themselves. This institutional bias against simple, effective solutions is a recurring theme in modern agriculture. Time and again, research identifies practices that are cheaper, safer, and more effective than conventional methods, only to see these discoveries buried under layers of commercial interests and bureaucratic inertia. But the internet age is changing this dynamic. Gardeners can now access scientific literature directly, share experiences with peers worldwide, and experiment with research-based techniques without waiting for official approval. Social media platforms allow rapid dissemination of practical knowledge that might otherwise remain locked in academic journals. This democratization of agricultural information is gradually eroding the gatekeeping power of traditional institutions. Gardeners who achieve success with aspirin therapy share their results online, inspiring others to experiment. University researchers, frustrated by the slow adoption of their discoveries, increasingly communicate directly with practitioners through blogs and videos. The aspirin therapy story exemplifies how modern information networks can bypass traditional channels to deliver science-based solutions to the people who need them. It's a model for how other buried agricultural discoveries might be resurrected and put to practical use. The future of plant disease management may well depend on this type of direct knowledge transfer from research laboratories to practicing gardeners. As chemical fungicides face increasing regulation and pathogens develop resistance to synthetic compounds, simple biological approaches like SAR activation become increasingly valuable. Aspirin therapy also represents a philosophical shift from fighting nature to working with it. Instead of declaring war on plant pathogens with ever more powerful chemical weapons, this approach recognizes that plants have sophisticated defense systems that can be activated through proper stimulation. This paradigm shift has implications far beyond disease control. If plants can be taught to defend themselves against pathogens, perhaps they can also be trained to resist insects, tolerate environmental stress, or optimize nutrient uptake. The field of plant immunology is revealing capabilities that could revolutionize how we think about crop protection. Some researchers are already exploring combinations of different SAR activators that might provide even broader protection than aspirin alone. Others are investigating how SAR responses can be enhanced through optimal nutrition or environmental management. The potential for developing integrated systems based on plant immune activation is enormous. But for practical gardeners, the immediate opportunity is clear. Aspirin therapy offers proven disease protection at minimal cost, with maximum safety. It's a technology that can be implemented immediately with materials available at any pharmacy. The transformation of tomato plants under aspirin protection is visible within weeks of starting treatment. Leaves develop a healthier, more vibrant appearance. Growth becomes more vigorous and uniform. Disease symptoms that typically appear in midsummer simply fail to develop. By season's end, the difference between treated and untreated plants is often dramatic. Aspirin-treated plants remain green and productive well into fall, while untreated plants succumb to the usual progression of diseases that limit growing seasons. The harvest from protected plants can be double or triple that of unprotected ones. This transformation comes from unleashing capabilities that were always present in the plants themselves. The genetic information for disease resistance exists in every tomato genome, waiting to be activated by the right environmental signals. Aspirin provides those signals, awakening dormant defenses and allowing plants to achieve their full potential. Understanding this mechanism changes how gardeners think about their role in plant health. Instead of being external defenders fighting constant battles against diseases, they become partners in activating internal defense systems. The shift from intervention to activation is both more effective and more sustainable. The elegance of aspirin therapy lies in its simplicity and biological logic. It works with natural systems rather than against them, enhancing processes that evolution perfected over millions of years. This alignment with natural principles explains both its effectiveness and its safety. As climate change brings new disease pressures and chemical resistance continues to develop, solutions like aspirin therapy become increasingly valuable. They offer hope that sustainable agriculture doesn't require choosing between effectiveness and environmental responsibility. The aspirin tablet dissolving in your spray bucket represents more than just disease control. It symbolizes a return to biological wisdom, a recognition that the most powerful technologies often mimic natural processes rather than replacing them. Every gardener who adopts aspirin therapy becomes part of a quiet revolution in plant protection. They're proving that simple, science-based solutions can outperform complex commercial systems while reducing costs and environmental impact. The future of gardening may well be written in stories like this. Ancient medicines revealing new applications, buried research discoveries finding practical expression, and gardeners taking control of their plant health destiny with knowledge instead of chemicals. The aspirin in your medicine cabinet isn't just a headache remedy. It's a gateway to understanding how plants really work and how simple interventions can produce extraordinary results. Your tomatoes have been waiting millions of years for this conversation between human medicine and plant biology. All it takes is one tablet, one bucket of water, and the willingness to trust that plants know how to defend themselves when given the right support. The results will speak for themselves in the health of your garden and the abundance of your harvest. Tell me in the comments if you've ever tried aspirin on your plants before, and what results you saw. Subscribe to the channel for more science-based gardening solutions that actually work without emptying your wallet or poisoning your soil.